I'm Ashley Hawkins, and I'm the manga librarian. And today we are talking about magical girls, or Mahou Shojo. And this is a continuation of the series in which I talk to you about various genres of manga and what they are, what they represent, what they do, what you should know about them, and so on. So today we're talking all about one of my personal favorite genres, probably the genre that was what got me originally into anime and manga, Mahou Shojo, the magical girl. And it's one of the genres that's actually fairly easy to recognize. And so let's go ahead and get into it. So you're probably actually really familiar with Mahou Shojo, or magical girls, because you probably have seen a girl around called Sailor Moon. So Sailor Moon is probably the best known magical girl. She's, fighting evil by moonlight, winning love by daylight. So, how did we get Sailor Moon? And what sort of impact has this genre sort of had on the larger manga landscape? Let's talk about that. So, magical girl, or Mahou Shoujo, is a subgenre of Japanese fantasy media. And this can include anime and manga, but it also can include light novels, video games, and actually quite a bit of live action media. And it's centered around young girls who possess magical abilities. And usually it involves a transformation sequence, and they transform from a typical everyday girl into a magical, superpowered version of themselves. One of the things that you should know about as an inspiration for the transformation genre of magical girl, because there is actually a little bit of a predecessor here, but you should know about tokusatsu hero shows. So you probably know a show called Power Rangers. And actually there are a lot of elements that are taken from tokusatsu and have been brought into magical girls. And that includes the transformation, also the anime versions of Mahou Shoujo usually include a monster of the week. That carries over from tokusatsu. There's a lot of carryover. So there's actually a lot of similarities between very popular magical girl properties and Super Sentai properties and other tokusatsu shows. So that's something to be aware of. The genre, we typically associate its emergence with 1966 with the anime series Sally the Witch, which was produced by Toei Animation, but there are some other inspirations and things that kind of can be associated. And there's also a lot of what is called Majoko, which means little witch. And those series were kind of the initial entry point that eventually became Mahou Shoujo. So there was actually a lot of stuff about little witches, and these little witches would kind of um, initiate the entry point. But in the 80s, Majoko really kind of fell out of favor in terms of Mahou Shoujo, and then we get shows like Magical Princess Miki Momo and Creamy Mommy, the Magic Angel, which are more of these involved these transformation sequences and things. So let's walk it back a little bit. So early magical girl works in the 50s and 70s we can actually kind of look at a work that I talked about in my Shojo video, Tezuka's Princess Knight, and that is kind of the prototype for the magical girl genre, because it set forth this idea of like girls taking on a role that they normally can't perform. So she takes on the role of a knight, and it enables her to do things that she wouldn't normally be able to do as a princess. Then we get the show Sally the Witch, which I mentioned before, in 1966. It's actually inspired by the television show Bewitched. And it sort of takes certain elements from there. And then we see our first manga series, which is Himitsu no Ako-chan, and that was serialized in Ribbon, and it showed up in 1969, and it's actually the first to use the concept of using a compact to transform. So we actually see that quite a bit. That shows up in Sailor Moon. But yeah, this idea of having like an item, and it's actually sort of associated with things that girls or women commonly carry around, like compacts, lipsticks, things that would be in your purse. And it's magical and it helps me transform, which is also interesting because isn't that kind of what makeup does? Says the woman who wears no makeup. Anyway, we then get into the 70s, 1972 to 1979 with Majoko series, and Toei is kind of the central powerhouse of Majoko. They produced the majority of them, and there's a certain alignment with the rise of Majoko, and there's the women's liberation movement in Japan. So there is kind of this rise of magical girls having power and a little bit of female empowerment. So there is kind of a tie between Mahou Shoujo and feminism, which might be interesting to know. Then we finally start to see like the more traditional magical girl. We have Toei releasing La La Belle, the magical girl, in 1980, and they actually used the term Mahou Shoujo. And then other studios besides Toei are beginning to produce magical girl series, so we get Magical Princess Miki Momo and Creamy Mommy. And they are taking the idea of girls transforming into grown-up images of themselves. So they're, you know, they're typically like young preteen girls, and then when they transform, they take on their adult version of themselves, which really lends itself to disguise. And we see this pop up fairly regularly, as something that happens in magical girl series. It's a pretty common concept. Particularly ones where the protagonist takes on something like a performing role. Often they'll become like an idol in their magical girl form. Let's see. And a lot of that gets linked to the increasing prominence of women at this time in Japanese society. So there's a politician called Totako Doi, who's very present during this time period, because we're talking about 1980 to 1989. There's the female band Princess, the rise of pop idol Seiko Matsuda. There's actually a bunch of pop idols that pop up at this time and are very prominent. And then the passage of the Equal Employment Opportunity Act in 1985. And one thing to note, though, is that it wasn't only women that watched these shows. Men actually enjoyed these shows as well. They really liked the transformation sequences. The transformation sequences were really uniquely animated, and they found them interesting. They still found the storylines fun. There's still a certain element of action, and so they were pretty popular. And because of the popularity of these Mahou Shojo shows, we really see the Majoko, the little witch shows, they really kind of take a fall, unfortunately, because the Mahou Shoujo just really appealed more to what was kind of going on in Japan at that time in terms of women and their roles and so on. And then we get to the 90s, which is where we get to my girl, Sailor Moon. So Sailor Moon is from 1991, is when the manga was first released, and then the anime was broadcast from 1992 to 1997. And this was a revolution of the Mahou Shoujo genre, because what it did was it took tokusatsu hero shows with like these transformation elements and everything, and then it combined it with feminine interests, and that was really just combining those elements just was a magic formula. And the thing is, like, magical girl series up until that point were really just comedy. If you watch Magical Princess Minky Momo or Creamy Mommy the Magic Angel, they are very much comedy series. They're fun, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy both of them. But they are... Sailor Moon can get very dark and very serious. And the whole tone of Mahou Shoujo was really changed by Sailor Moon's sort of emergence, because that's not to say that Sailor Moon doesn't have its comedic moments. It does, and it can be a lot of fun, but it can also get really, like I said, it can get really dark, it can get really serious. It's also like the first one that involved a team of magical girls, as opposed to just one magical girl. And the team of magical girls are the main characters. And there are male characters, but they're like support characters. And quite honestly, how much support is Tuxedo Mask, really? And the format really stuck. And it really changed the whole landscape of what this type of entertainment could look like. And then it really diversified. So some other series that are very popular are Cutie Honey, or Cutie Honey Flash, I should say, because Cutie Honey Flash was the 1997 remake of the 1973 Cutie Honey that was reconfigured for a female demographic. And then there's also, let's see, the other big magical girl series that is another favorite of mine is Cardcaptor Sakura. And Cardcaptor Sakura is really interesting because it was highly targeted towards girls, like highly targeted towards girls, but it's extreme, like Sailor Moon has its male fans, and I'd say like it's actually more popular with men now than it was in its original incarnation. But Cardcaptor Sakura really was popular in its time, even though it had themes like cosplay, boys love, and even some Yuri elements. Like, it had a lot of things that were really heavily shoujo, but for whatever reason, Cardcaptor Sakura has just really latched on and been very universally popular. And it's probably got something to do with the moe factor. Sakura herself is incredibly cute. Her outfits are adorable. I have multiple Cardcaptor Sakura figures. I've told myself that I have one more Cardcaptor Sakura figure that my husband has obtained for me, and I've said she's the final one, because I get instantly drawn to them because they're just so beautiful. And I think that is also kind of the appeal. The differences with Sakura, as opposed to like Sailor Moon, is that she isn't totally on a team. She does work with Shaoran, but you know, she isn't really on a team, and she doesn't actually transform into these outfits. They're made for her by her best friend. So it kind of plays a little bit with some of the conventions that were starting to be built up. Also, Slayers is a magical girl series that isn't shoujo. It's definitely not shoujo. So these are just kind of things to keep in mind. it's at this point that Mahou Shojo and magical girls are starting to leave the shoujo only space, really. Like they have their appeal to shonen. And then we're starting to get into the new era. In 2004, we get the super powerhouse Pretty Cure. So, I am a fan of Mahou Shoujo and Magical Girl series from the 90s and maybe even the 80s, and I really like the aesthetics and things like that, so I'm really into like Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura and things like that. But there are a ton of Pretty Cure fans. Pretty Cure is a huge powerhouse in and of itself. You more than likely have patrons who are Pretty Cure super fans. It started in 2004, and they have put out new installments yearly. So every year there's a new Pretty Cure. It is very similar to Sailor Moon in a lot of ways. There's generally a team. It draws influences from tokusatsu, and it is heavily focused on action. It's actually more focused on action than Sailor Moon is. And it uses the same talent group as Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. What this did was push Pretty Cure beyond its target audience of young girls. So now it's got like it's bonkers how many fans Pretty Cure has. And then the target demographic starts expanding, mostly because, people like me are growing older, and including in Japan, the traditional fans of Sailor Moon, Cardcaptor Sakura, they're growing older, but they still love those properties, and they want to see more mature takes on these stories. So we get things like Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha, and then the very, very popular Puella Magi Madoka Magica from 2011, which is a very dark television show and is not aimed at kids and is aimed at an older audience and will make you cry when you watch it, and has an appeal for both men and women, and has a bajillion figures everywhere and is super popular. And then we have other stuff that just is popping up all over the place. And actually, fairly recently, Magica, or Little Witch stories, are actually starting to get kind of a resurgence. So we see Little Witch Academia, Tweeny Witches, little things are starting to really pop up, and it's kind of fun. And then we're starting to see more and more parodies. So there's a show that's actually out right now, in April of 2021, that is that I really enjoyed the premiere of, and that's Fairy Raunmaru, which is actually kind of the successor to a show called Cute High Earth Defense Club Love, which is a gender-flipped sort of take on magical girls, but they're magical boys. And they have the same sort of transformation sequences, and it's a lot of fun. It's kind of aimed at what's called fujoshi, which are fans of boys love and yaoi. But also it's just a lot of fun to watch. And these are just, they're meant to kind of poke fun at the genre and be fun and entertaining and comedic to watch. So that's kind of the history of Mahou Shoujo. Some themes. That you kind of want to keep in mind are there's usually like this theme of like femininity and youth. So they're typically, your typical magical girl is anywhere from 10 to 14. Usually in that range. So she's going to be super cute, and she's going to have elements associated with what are feminine. It's a highly feminine genre. Her accessories are things like compacts, like I said, lipsticks, wands, and they are usually really cute. They're often made into toys. Getting any of the Sailor Moon transformation objects is actually really expensive because they're made by Bandai, and Bandai just makes them super expensive. And generally these girls are like very, very cute, sometimes overly cute. Villains are often older women, very voluptuous. One thing to kind of point out is when Chibiusa in Sailor Moon becomes a villain for a little while, when she becomes the Black Lady, she actually becomes very voluptuous and sexy, and so older femininity can kind of be associated with darker elements sometimes, and that's something to keep in mind. We also see a lot of transformation with like I said, those transformation items, and sometimes the characters become older versions of themselves, or they're able to take on disguises. Sometimes it's just their outfits that change, and there isn't too much disguising going on. And we see there's a lot of talk about heroines. And this, like I said, comes from tokusatsu. And there's a term called henshin heroine. So henshin heroine is transforming heroine. And usually it's like you're an ordinary schoolgirl that takes on an adorable costume, kawaii, and usually the weapon is like a scepter, or a wand or something, but and then we see a lot of romance and friendship. And it's it can be very heteronormative, which I think is why Puella Magi Madoka Magica really hit like such a nerve, because it was so profoundly Yuri based. And that's not to say, it is important to point out there are same-sex relationships in Sailor Moon. There is a lot of gender fluidity that's kind of depicted in Sailor Moon. And there's interesting things that go on, but there is kind of this fixation on romance, but that kind of has more to do with certain conventions of Shojo, I think, than it has to do with Mahou Shojo. And I think we're gonna see a lot more. I think Puella Magi Madoka Magica actually kind of set a certain tone. I think we're starting to see more and more rebellion magical girls. Like, also just magical girls in general in the otaku community and in like the Lolita community and in kawaii fashion. There is like a certain rebelliousness that is associated with magical girls, and I think queer communities definitely really identify a lot with. There's a reason why Sailor Moon has such a following. I would definitely say there's stuff going on. And it'd be interesting to see where it goes. Let's see. The other thing to note is that there are like live action series that exist, but I'm not going to get into them too deeply. Also, merchandising is a powerhouse in terms of magical girl stuff. Particularly in terms of Sailor Moon. It's very easy to get Sailor Moon merchandise. And they make a lot of really great collabs and try to steal all of my money. And it just is what it is. The other thing to note is that this is a genre that's had a big impact on Western media. And we've seen a lot of animated series, not anime series, but animated series in the United States that really take from magical girl series. So, Powerpuff Girls, Steven Universe, She-Ra and the Princesses of Power. I'd even say that My Little Pony reboot is very magical girlish. Witch and Winx Club, Totally Spies. There's a lot of influence that's kind of gotten here. So that's also another reason why, like, for some reason this just like really zeitgeisted with the 90s. I think it was more than just Japan. It's just in general, women in general wanted to feel empowered, and there was something about these stories that really, you could still be cute, you could still be pretty, but you could also kick butt. And I think there was a lot of power to that, and girls just really adhered to it. So that's Mahou Shoujo. That's magical girls. I'm gonna cut it off there because I could talk more, but that's Mahou Shoujo. That's what you should know. Like I said, it's a really important genre. It's always going to be around. I think we're going to see some really interesting stuff coming out more and more as time goes on, and I'm always interested to see like the evolution of it. And hey, check out Fairy Raunmaru. It's it's pretty wild from the one episode that has come out thus far. And the next episode comes out tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. So yeah, I hope this was informative. If you have any questions, please let me know. Leave a comment down below. I will get back to you as soon as possible. If there are any particular series you'd like to hear more about, I'm more than happy to do a video that is just about Sailor Moon, if anybody's interested. But I feel like other people have done Sailor Moon deep dives before. But hey, one more won't hurt. To understand like how much I love Sailor Moon. My cat that you see in the background, the black one, is named Luna. So, which is the name of the cat from Sailor Moon. But that's all for today. I thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.